In this video, we're going to go over comping. Comping is creating one part from several takes, choosing the best pieces of each take to create the best possible part. In a previous video, we did loop recording, so we're going to start with the example of using loop recording. Loop recording allows us to automatically put each take onto a different layer. Layers are the important element here when we're doing comping. After that, I'll show you how to set up the layers if you didn't initially record in that way. It's still very easy. There's some keyboard shortcuts that you can use to speed up the workflow on that. So for this comping example, I'm going to use the guitar Empire track. So I'm going to open it, expanding the layers by right-clicking, select Expand Layers. And before I do this, I'm just going to save a new version. So I'm going to click Save, Save New Version, and I'm going to say before comping Empire part. That will allow me to get back to this point if I really don't like how it's going. Now, the way that comping works with multiple layers is you see all the takes are right here. We can audition any take by clicking the arrow. We talked about this before. So this will promote any of the layers to the top layer or the actual audible layer that we can hear. Now, I'm going to make sure this one top layer is back on top. After loop recording, the layer 1 or the very top layer is a duplicate of the fourth take or the final take that you did. So you can actually remove that. So I'll click here and take that out because we're going to build a composite, so we really don't need anything there to start with. To make things even more clear, I'm going to name the top layer a composite, and I do that in the inspector right here by clicking on the layers property and select rename. And I'm going to call this Comp 1 because this will be my first composite. I might not do another one, but sometimes I'll do 2 or more composites. If you're working with an artist, you might want to give them a couple of different examples of composites that you might use for a lead vocal or a solo. So with that said, it'll make it a lot easier to make sure I know where the composite is. Now the way that I build a composite is just using the arrow tool. I just swipe across the material that I want and double click it and it goes up there. So I'll just take these notes right here, just swipe out to about here, double click, and now that is in the top or the first section of my composite. Now, if I want to try out some other things that I might want to use later on in this solo or this little lead line, I can use the listen tool. This is a great aid when you're using comping in Studio One. You could just point at any of these phrases you want to hear. It will solo it out and let you hear it. All right, so let's select the next thing we want to do. All right, we're going to go with that. So I'm going to use the arrow tool here, and we'll swipe over this. We'll get it right up to here. And I think I'll zoom in just a little bit more here. I'll turn the inspector off to give a little bit more width. I'm going to turn snap off to make sure I get this. You can also readjust these even before you push them up there. And we'll get this note up there. So now we've got the next phrase. Now I'm going to try and see if I can pick out a few more notes to use for this. All right, I kind of like that, so I'm going to go back to the arrow tool. We'll just swipe across these notes here and push them up there. And let's just go back again to the listen tool. Well, not that one. Well, certainly this one's kind of nice. So I'll go back with using 1, and I'll use the keyboard shortcuts to quickly switch. So I use 1. I've got my arrow tool right back. I'll select this right here, and I'll push that up by double clicking. And then we just need the final note here to complete this part. So I'll go back to the listen tool. This time I'll use 8 to select the listen tool. All right, so that's probably the best one right here. I'll just expand the range that I selected last time out to the ending here and double click that. And now I've got that up there on the composite track. I'll just rewind and hear how my composite sounds with the rest of the song. All right, we're missing a little bit of the echo. I could just drag this out and that will expand that part. All right, so I think we've got our part worked out. There's a little glitch right here. So what I'm going to do is just take this crossfade. There's an automatic 10 millisecond crossfade when the part's overlapped. I'll just move the crossfade back just a little bit more. All right, that cleans that up a little bit. So now that I've got the part worked out, I'm going to bounce it to a single event. That's easily done by just selecting all of the events and then using Command B. Now I've worked out my composite part. All right, so that's how comping works in Studio One if you've done the recording using loop recording and recording all of the takes to layers. Now I want to show an example of comping if I have 3 parallel tracks where I didn't record to layers in the first place. How do you get your tracks into the configuration where they're all in layers? It does help to have a keyboard shortcut to create a new layer. So I'm going to create that right now under the keyboard shortcuts. All we need to do is search for the word layer, and we'll find add layer. That's currently mapped to this. I don't think it's mapped to anything by default. I'm just going to map it to F10 for now. Right now that's mapped to show browser pool, but I'm going to go ahead and override that. So I'll assign that to F10 and click apply. Now if I hit F10, I'll create a new layer. Now I could just use any of these as the starting point, but I'm going to just create a new track to hold my composite GTR comp track. And then I can just grab each of these takes and put it into this track. So I'll just put the first one on here and I'll hit F10 to push it into the layer. I'll drag the next one, F10, F10, and now I've got it all packed. So if I expand layers, you'll see all my takes are right here. If I want, I could rename these layers to takes. So you can right click on any layer and rename layer. And now we could call this one Take 1 if we just prefer that over layer. Clearly you don't actually need to rename them, but it does help keep things a little more organized. Now if you're on the top level of this, you can go under layers in the right click menu and do rename layer right here, and we'll just call this our comp for our composite layer. That way it's more clear in the inspector as we're working with all the different layers. Now from here we're ready to just do comping. With the arrow tool selected, you can just pick what we want, double click, promote it to the composite layer. So that's a summary of building composite tracks in Studio One version 2. Great new feature in Studio One, very easy to use, very powerful, and it really speeds up doing these composites. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.